welcome to the May 28th Joint Health and Ed and Budget Committee meetings. We are following the same format we followed. Mr. Piercy. Thanks for the warning, though. I'll lean in. We're following the same format that we did last year, and that is we are going to call the Health and Ed Committee to order, call roll, look at our minutes from last time. That will be followed by Budget Committee doing the same. And this is a Health and Ed meeting. We will discuss the 7 items you have on your agenda. After the Health and Ed Committee discusses, Budget Committee can also discuss, but only Health and Ed will vote on a topic. After we have voted, if Budget Committee chooses to, they can entertain the same item. They can have a motion to vote, a motion to defer to their next meeting. And again, I'll repeat, this is how we did it last year. It helped Mike Smith, our budget director, and his assistant, Mark, keep the minutes well and have things in order. And I think it helped organize the next budget meeting, which is Thursday.
That's correct.
Anything else in preamble? Mark, if you would please call the roll for Health and Ed.
Commissioner Boyd? Here. Commissioner Davidson?
Here.
Mr. Gooch?
Here.
Mr. McMurray?
Here.
Commissioner Oliver?
Present.
Commissioner Wilson?
Here.
Commissioner Dodd?
Go ahead and do your minutes.
We have a quorum on Health and Ed, and I will entertain the minutes from last month. Vice Chair Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. I have reviewed the minutes from our last meeting. I find them to be in order, and without objection, I move for their approval.
You have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. I will defer to Budget Chairman Robert Peete.
Well, I also want to say welcome to the May 28th, 2024 joint meeting, and I think it's a good thing all the way around. Last year we were able to do this in one vote, and we were able to do away with the meeting. But having said that, Mark, I'm going to ask you to call roll for our Budget Committee, please.
Commissioner Gooch? Here. Commissioner Harris? Here. Commissioner Irvin? Here. Commissioner Johnson? Here. Commissioner Piercy? Here. Commissioner Shrino?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, here. So we have a quorum, and I'm going to call on our Vice Chairman, Commissioner Gooch, for our approval of our minutes from the May 14th meeting, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have reviewed those minutes and find them to be in order. Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. I'll go ahead and mention we have checked with Mark. There are no public comments, and I'll turn it back over to.
Thanks, Chairman P. We are not aware that anyone signed up, and I hear a gentleman from the audience saying he signed up. I'll defer to our tonight's secretary.
I didn't get anything from the mayor's office. I'm aware of.
I feel strongly that we need to adhere to having someone sign up prior. We need to adhere to having our secretary or our mayor's office indicate to us that someone has signed up. I fear that if we start receiving people from the audience, it will never come down. And likewise, I don't want to start a precedence of engaging with the audience and having conversations and debates that aren't on the agenda. So excuse us for that. And we can look at changing the process, making sure we're receiving notices if need be.
Let me check.
And in the meantime, we will double check and see if that submittal did indeed go through. Having said that, we will
Mr.
come back to that in a
Chairman.
moment. Ms. Oliver.
May I make a motion to let the gentleman speak in public, since he said he signed up and we don't have verification?
At the chairman's discretion and in conference with the chairman of budget, we do not wish to set a precedence of entertaining comments from the public unless they have been duly recognized as being registered.
We're double checking. The finance office has nothing from there, but I believe the mayor was double checking the sign up for the gentleman to make sure that, I believe the mayor's office had somebody out last week and was checking to see if somebody had signed up, but we had not gotten anything from the mayor's office as far as me or Mark.
And that would make me very...
Thank you, I appreciate that, because we are here for the public.
And I think
So
they're double checking right now.
it's good that we double check to ensure. Thank you.
And if there is an error made on reporting this individual submitting, then the chairman would by all means be eager to have him speak. While that's underway, I do want to recognize we have some school board members. Thank you for coming. I see Ms. Darby, Mr. Young, Ms. Bratton, and I see Ms. Rosales. Thank you. Back in the shade. Thanks for speaking up. Also, we have various members of the administration. I'm not going to go through names. I see Mr. Tidwell is here as well. And those from the administration, thank you for being here. I know this is a big event and large topic. I see Commissioner Pettis-Reed with us as well. Thank you, Pettis, for joining us tonight.
Mr. Chairman, there was an oversight in the mayor's office. Matt Fee did sign up at approximately 2:15 Friday afternoon, so he followed the standard operating procedures.
Thank you. And Mr. Fee, thank you for being patient during our conversation about that. Ms. Oliver, thank you for the support of the community. And with the protocol being met, we have one speaker signed up tonight, Mr. Matt Fee. Mr. Matt Fee. You have 3 minutes.
Mr. Fee, please accept our apologies. It was an oversight.
Actually, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do appreciate you coming over and checking with me. Thank you very much for that. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Fee, and I live on Winding Branch Drive in Christiana. First off, I just wanted to say welcome to Dr. Sullivan. I know I'm not capable of coming up with adequate words, but I just wanted to say that my wife and I have kept you and your family in our thoughts and will continue to do so. And thank you for being here today. To other business, I've recently caught up on all the previous budget committee meetings, and I have an observation, a question, and a request for your consideration. First, the observation. Last year, when going through the budget process, the statement of proposed operations that was part of the budget summary for publication showed that the estimated fund balance for the general fund on June 30th, 2024 would approximately be $45.5 million. But the new one published for this year's budget shows the estimated year-end balance for the general fund to be $70.8 million. That is $25.3 million higher than what the estimates were last year, and a very healthy 40% for what is appropriated for the 24-25 budget year. The curious observation that I have is that while watching the previous meetings, I've not heard a single mention of this healthy fund balance, but just that we are in a quote-unquote very tight budget. My question: how did we get to a point where the year-end balance is 55% more than what was expected during the last budget process? Last, my request. I would request that if the committee is set on raising the pay table by 1% for the general fund, which was discussed at the last meeting, that they would, instead of decreasing the county contribution to the library by $420,000, $350, which was proposed by Chairman Harris, $70, which was proposed by the mayor, and instead take it from the very healthy fund balance. The county could very easily fully fund the library budget request and raise the pay and barely make a dent in the general fund balance. I would also request to know how the county intends to reinvest the remainder back into the community to help improve the lives of residents. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to hearing the ideas on how to invest in our communities and improve the quality of life here in Rutherford County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fee. And thank you, Mayor Carr. We will move on with item number 4, our regular agenda. Thanks, Mark. I do want to say that Dr. Sullivan and I spoke tonight and agreed to be brief in expressing our condolences. And I got to be careful or I will lose my composure. But Dr. Sullivan, thank you for coming tonight. I know this was so critical. This is Dr. Sullivan's first public exercise since we've witnessed him and his family go through a tragedy. And as agreed upon, I'm going to leave it at that. Bless you. Thank you for being here. We're here at your service. I know you have Dr. Martin and Brian Runyon and Michael Smith here as well. If you need our assistance, please give us a thumbs up. We will move on with school board general purpose fund budget amendment.
I'm gonna try it. Yeah, I'm gonna go for it. All right, thank you all. As Chairman Dodd said, thank you all for all the support. It's been 3 weeks that I wouldn't wish on anyone. So being able to be back and focus on something like a budget is something that's important. This is a huge part of my job as a director of schools, is to propose a budget with our board, get a budget passed, and then present to you what our budget is. And so I'll probably have to call on Dr. Martin and Mr. Runyon quite a bit to help go through some details, but a lot of these things we started working on in December and really were well finished by the time May 8th happened. We'd already had our work session for our board as well. So first thing you have before you is a Fund 141 budget amendment. This amendment is to increase Fund 141 budgeted revenues and expenditures in the amount of $5,556,938 to recognize the awarded summer camp grant for fiscal year 23-24. On January 22nd, 2021, the Tennessee General Assembly enacted the Tennessee Learning Loss Remediation and Student Acceleration Act to address the learning loss of students due to COVID-19 related school closures. Through this law, all Tennessee school districts are required to offer learning loss remediation summer programming for students in rising K through 8. Starting in summer 2021, provisions of this law that were set to expire last summer of 2023 included summer learning camps for rising grades 1 through 3 and after-school learning mini camps or stream camps. However, in the 23 legislative session, the Tennessee General Assembly amended the act to continue summer programming, summer learning camps, after-school summer learning mini camps or stream, and learning loss bridge camps for rising grades K through 9 annually. These funds will be used to fund summer work for principals, teachers, EAs, and secretaries. There is no local match required for this grant. And then the motion is recommended to amend budgeted revenues and expenditures in Fund 141 general purpose in the amount of $5,556,938, and this starts next Monday, so our summer camps.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Any questions regarding the amendment? And remember that both.
I move to approve as presented, Chairman.
Do I have a second? Okay, we have a motion to approve and a second by Health and Ed, which is appropriate. Is there any further discussion from either Health and Ed or Budget? Remembering that Budget cannot vote yet. This is a Health and Ed item. Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Budget's going to be looking at, one of the things that we're proposing and looking at is give a 1% across the board raise for our first responders and our sheriff's department. That amount of money is a little bit under $900,000. Now, what we'll be proposing is we took $375,000 out of the library, which had a budget of $2.2 million. So that's where we took that. And you want me to wait this on one side?
May I jump in for a moment? Would you consider doing that with 141?
Is it 141 or 177?
Tonight, yeah, either one of those. This is just the grant money for the summer school program.
Oh.
Is that, would you mind?
I can wait. I have no problem.
Yeah, I think we can dialogue about that with a little more robustly at that point.
41?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
no,
let's,
177.
The $5 million, Commissioner Oliver's asking, confirming where the money's going.
Yeah, and these are this year's operating budget, so we'll get into next year's after these two fund budget amendments.
Yeah, thank you both, Commissioners. This amendment is regarding this year's budget, and then we'll pick up here in a moment. Craig. Any other questions or comments from either? Mr. Chairman.
I'd just like to pass on to our budget committee. We will not be voting here, but immediately after they vote, we can vote. Now, if we don't vote tonight, which we do not have to, and that's on any of these items, we'll end up voting on them on the 30th, which we've got pretty full load there too. So I would recommend that we vote on these tonight after hearing what they hear. Now, if the committee doesn't want to, I just want you to know that we can defer to our next meeting.
Yes, thank you. And any decision on this topic, you can make a different decision on the next topic. You may wish to vote on this one and move it forward, but defer on a budget item. Correct, Chairman?
That's correct. Thank you.
So we have before us a motion. Motion is seconded. Amended budget revenues and expenditures in Fund 141 General Purpose in the amount of $5,556,938 as presented. If there's no further discussion, I will ask Mark to call the roll for Health and Ed.
I just need to know who made the second because I don't know the voices, so.
Commissioner McMurray.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyd?
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner McMurray?
Yes.
Commissioner Oliver?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes. The motion passes, and thank you, patience from the commissioners who spoke up, Ms. Oliver and Mr. Harris. I'll defer to you, Chairman.
While this is on our minds, speaking to the Budget Committee, do I have a recommendation either to vote on this and hear a motion, or do you want to defer this till our next meeting?
Chairman P., I'll move that we accept Health and Ed's recommendation to amend the budget request. 141.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yeah.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin? Yes. Commissioner Johnson? Yes. Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Shrino?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Motion carries.
Thank you. The second item, Dr. Sullivan, School Capital Projects Fund Budget Amendment. Oh, sorry, Brian. Excuse me.
We're going to tag team this tonight.
Mr. Runyon, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is the second amendment that we have, and this is for Fund 177, which is our Capital Projects Fund. So each July 1st, outstanding purchase orders in the fund are liquidated. The funds roll into fund balance, which in this fund is $34,685 committed for capital projects. These purchase orders are projects that were not finished by June 30th, and amendment number 1 took those funds out of the $34,685 committed for capital projects account and rebudgeted the expenditures for carryover projects that were approved in the previous year, but they had not been completed. Due to accounting procedures set forth by the Tennessee Comptroller's Office, the amendment reverses amendment number 1 to bring the budgeted amounts in the balance, to bring the budgeted amounts in balance and not over budget. The recommended motion is to reverse the 23-24 capital projects budget Fund 141 by increasing account 34,685 committed for capital projects by $13,577,898 and by decreasing maintenance and repair service buildings account 91,300,335 other contracted services, account number 91,300,399 building purchases, and account number 91,300,732 for a combined total of the same amount of $13,577,898 as presented.
And I believe Michael Smith can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe this was one of our audit findings last year, was having this account over. Was this a different one?
This wasn't an audit finding. It was a discussion with the auditors of
I knew it came
a discussion item as part of their audit that they would like to see this differently. And so it wasn't a finding, but this is something we agreed to show differently. And so.
So we have heard the cleanup motion read by the school board. Are there any further discussion or questions from, yes, Commissioner Wilson?
For the record, I believe you said capital projects budget. I think you said 141 by error. I just want to clear that up. Should somebody actually just move to approve as presented, I think you got the wrong account number.
That it's 177. If
Right.
I said 141,
I just wanted to get that clear in the room before we went further. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman, or Vice Chair.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Ms. Oliver, please, Health and Ed, go ahead.
can Mr. Smith clarify or explain this once again, what's taking place here?
So historically, here in this county every year, what happens is we move the expense of a prior encumbrance into the current year, and that has been the practice here for many years. This past year, the Comptroller's Office took issue with something they had to adjust as part of their audit, and it was the first time I believe they've taken issue since I'm aware, since I started auditing here back in 2014. I believe Mark may have started here the 1 year before me, and I don't believe they took issue in 2013 with it.
No.
So they requested that we not do that, and essentially that is converting it to kind of a full GAAP basis. And so this is reversing out the entry that does that. Now, that means that these projects will continue to go on. They will be paid out of a prior year encumbrance amount. 34,120 is the account number, but they will still be there. It is all about where that expense lies in which fiscal year. So it's more of a accounting budgetary entry. There's no new projects being approved with this. There's no new money being approved or disapproved with this. And I believe this reverses out the exact same dollar amount as the amendment you saw in probably August or September of this fiscal year. But without getting too detailed of the debits and credits, that's what this does.
And how would that make the books appear by not doing that versus doing it?
So what happens is if you run a statement today, as of today, once this is made, you will not see the actual expense on the income statement as of today. It's going to be in a balance sheet account, prior year encumbrances. However, when they do the audit, they then book the expenses when they convert it from modified accrual to full accrual accounting. So you'll see it as part of the audit, but if you run an income statement as of today, you will have to look in prior year encumbrance amount. The purchase order would still be open.
Thank you.
Mr. Irvin.
Actually, rather than get too far in the weeds, would it be possible, I'd like to make a recommendation on the budget side to defer this particular one so that we can get a little more detail in terms of exactly what's moved where. And I don't know the exact procedure to do that.
Mr. Smith? I think Mr. Smith, okay, excuse me.
Well, I was going to say, we have a motion and a second on the floor, if I'm not mistaken.
Right,
No,
he's
we
just
don't-
saying when it comes to budget.
We don't have a motion
When it
yet.
comes to budget, we'll entertain to defer.
Okay.
But they need to,
So
oh, I'm sorry, I thought you had a motion in a second. Sorry.
I was just trying to get more detail in terms of exactly what's being reclassed or whatever, taken out and put back in. And this is a very good high-level summary in terms of the basic categories, but I'm trying to get a little more in the weeds on this, and that's why I was asking, when it comes time, I'd like to defer this, but I don't need a question right now.
We're also going to look at this same item under item number 6, if you go down to the Educational Capital Projects Fund, so we'll be discussing it more too.
But Mr. Smith, if no one objects, do you have any more detail that, or do you need to prepare a report?
I can follow up on Thursday night with something in more detail, or I can go in more detail tonight. It's up to the will of the committees.
So if Health and Ed can do a couple of things, Health and Ed can likewise ask for more information, but that would stall the process. Health and Ed could consider passing this as presented by the school board with a recommendation to budget. As normal, budget can dissect an item to any extent they wish at their meeting. So I will entertain a motion or further discussion from the Health and Ed Committee on the motion as presented by Mr. Runyon. Mr. Sullivan, yeah, Dr. Sullivan.
I think from the school system standpoint, we don't have a preference. We were just asked to do this as an accounting practice to clear things up, and so that's where we are.
Let me see if I can explain it maybe in a little different way too. So what happens, and I'll try to walk through this on a project basis. So let's say they're going to put a new roof on at a school, doesn't matter which school. Let's just say, for example, they're going to put a new roof on. They're going to pull a purchase order. Let's say they pull that in May. Well, it's going to take more than a month to put a new roof on an entire school. So that purchase order is pulled in May of whatever fiscal year. And so that money, we had enough money during that fiscal year when the purchase order was pulled, so we pulled that purchase order. In years past, we would have closed that purchase order and reissued a new one essentially in the next budget year. And to do that, we have to amend the budget for the next year and to increase it, which we did in September or August, September, October, sometime in the fall is when, and that's been the practice here, is the schools always bring an amendment to budget prior year purchase orders into the current year. However, the Comptroller's Office has asked us to leave that in a prior year encumbrance amount. And so what that does is that leaves it forever restricted or reserved is probably a better term, on the balance sheet. And then at the end of the year, they roll all of those to expense the prior year encumbrances as part of the audit. So then it will show up there. And so what happens was we were doing that prematurely so that we could show the expense throughout the year. We were essentially going from modified accrual to a full accrual during the year, and they do that for us at the end of the year. And so when they do it, it was doubling the expense, and they were having to back out the entries we made, and they've requested that we not do that. So if you'll notice, Brian's amendment here decreases all of those expense line items. And so what's going to happen is if we don't approve this tonight or Thursday night, it's going to show the fund budgeted into a deficit. Now, we won't actually be in an actual deficit, but it's going to show it budgeted into a deficit, which is why we're decreasing those expense accounts here. And if you notice, we're increasing the fund balance account, which is where that, right now, those prior year encumbrances are lying, and we're still doing those projects. So as we cut a check for that roof in July or August of the next fiscal year, we're crediting cash, but the debit is not to an expense account. We're going to hit a prior year encumbrance account on the balance sheet, and then the auditor is going to expense a prior year encumbrance for us. I don't know if Mark can, that's the best way I know to explain it.
I might say also, we're going to be handling this fund going forward just like we handle Fund 141. It's going to happen the exact same way. There's really no magic to this. We're just essentially voiding a budget amendment that we did in September to bring it back to the way it was before is all we're doing. I'm sorry?
And then just moving forward, then just don't do it again, basically.
Right, exactly right. We then this
But
coming
it's
September.
no real deficit, it's just
This coming September,
paperwork.
we won't have any budget amendment similar to the one we did last September. We're just essentially voiding it. And
if y'all remember, our audit was completed. I believe our report was probably released in January this year.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when we got direction from the auditors, and we had further conversation with them. And so they were still here. They're still here on a normal basis doing our audit in September. They showed up, 2 weeks ago, and they'll be here through September. And so they did not tell us in time that we just proceeded like normal, like it had never been an issue. And kind of like when you get a new auditor, they change the way they want to see things, and this was their preference, and we agreed to it. So,
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the Fund 177 fund balance amendment as presented.
Second.
We have a second, I believe, Ms. Oliver, I heard first. Any further discussion on this matter? Mark, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Boyd?
Yes.
Commissioner Davidson?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch? Yes. Commissioner McMurray?
Yes.
Commissioner Oliver?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson? Yes. Commissioner Dodd?
Yes. Thank you, Health and Ed. Mr. P.
The only comment I'd like to make before I take recommendations from budget, and of course I recognize Commissioner Irvin has already said he'd like to wait on this, but I think what you're wanting to do in holding this up may not be helping us. This is basically a requirement that the state has given us to do our bookkeeping a certain way. And that's all we're doing is adhering to what the state has ordered us to do. Michael, am I correct on that? So I would recommend we go ahead and do this. Now, we'll be discussing 177, as I said, in later today a little bit further down. And I think that's what you want to get into is the line items in 177. If I'm not, correct me. Having said that, any comments from the Budget Committee? If not, we'll entertain a motion, either to defer or accept, whatever y'all want to do, guys.
Motion to defer.
I have a motion to defer. Commissioner Irving, do I hear a second? I hear a second. Any discussion? Mark, call roll on this. I won't be able to hear a yay, nay vote, so.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris? Yes. Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson? Yes. Commissioner Piercy?
Yes.
Commissioner Srinial?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Okay, so we'll discuss this at our next meeting on the 30th.
Next item, number 6, 2024-2025 budget review. And that begins with Centralized Cafeteria Fund, tab 13 for you budget guys. And I believe we have this to present live to the audience as well. So, Mike?
I just want to make a clerical kind of announcement. So for the Budget Committee members, this is in your notebook. I did hand out a revised summary sheet that includes the revision that the school board passed, I believe it was last week, a revision to Fund 141. That summary sheet I handed out would go as an insert under tab 1 on your books. However, the detailed budget that is in the Budget Committee members' books for the Health and Ed members, it is also on the iPad. It is also on your iPads as well. If there's any questions about finding those pieces of papers, just let me know, but I hope that clarifies where everything is.
Let's let the Health and Ed guys, if you find it on your tablet, let's make sure we get help if we want to pull that, if you don't have a paper copy. Health and Ed, are you guys ready for Mr. Runyon to proceed? Please proceed with Fund 143, correct?
Okay, so I'm going to start off with the revenue portion of Fund 143. And again, just to remind everybody, 143 is Central Cafeteria, or sometimes called food service. There's only probably about 10 different revenue codes that we use within this account, and the majority of the revenue that comes in through here is from federal USDA revenue. There is some revenue that comes in through lunch payments, and then also a little bit of investment income that also comes through there as well. But the majority of it is from the federal government. So if you look at your largest, your 47111 account number on there, it's the USDA school lunch program. With this year, we have budgeted $14,550,000 in that line. And then your next one is your lunch payments for children, which is your 43,521, $6,305,000. And then a couple of others, your USDA commodities, and then also breakfast, and then USDA other fruits and vegetables, all of those trailing at a little over 1.5 million, one's 2.9 million. But the majority of this, like I said, the 14 million comes from your federal funding. So for a total amount of $28,823,550 in revenue budgeted for the 143 fund. Do y'all have any questions about anything there?
Any questions of Mr. Runyon from either Health and Ed or Budget? Chair has one question on, are you going to cover the expenses in a moment? Okay, I'll stand down. This is, Mr. Runyon would like us to discuss revenue side before we get into expenses. So if there's no questions on revenue, please proceed.
Okay, so for the Fund 143 expenditure side, there are two different accounts that are budgeted out of. One is 72310 Board of Education, which just covers our fees for audit services and workers' comp insurance. The main account number there is 73100, which is a food service account. And as you can see, the majority of the budgeted amounts in there comes from our salaries and benefits, and then also from food supplies. Obviously, your 73100 422 food supply line, we have $14 million budgeted in there, and that's pretty much all the food that is supplied to the cafeterias throughout the year. And then your 9.5 million in 73100. 165 is for all your cafeteria personnel, and then you also have a little over 300,000 for other salaries and wages. And then also down through there, as you can see, another line that's pretty high is, or that's budgeted high, is 73100 207, which is your medical insurance line. So that one's budgeted at $1.2 million. Is there any questions y'all have about what you see there? Anything else I can cover as far as, I didn't want to go into the ones that were budgeted very small, because they're just, we put money in there just to be able to cover certain small things like postal charges, non-salaried lines, travel, PD, they do a couple of PD sessions per year. But that's pretty much it in this fund.
Mr. Runyon, do you have any new positions here? Is this just to get us through this budget year?
This is to get it through 23-24, or 24-25 fiscal year. We did not budget any new positions in cafeteria at all.
Your expenditures are anticipated to be 33.5. Your revenue is 28.8. Where's the difference coming from?
Fund balance.
Fund balance, which is at 12 million?
Yes. Well, let me see if it's 12.
So your fund balance will remain at 37.69% after the deficit's covered, or will it come out of that?
So they're started with 17, and then they have to have a planned spend down, and I believe that's part of their planned spend down. So even with their planned spend down, their fund balance will remain at 37.69 after the planned spend down.
So very healthy.
Mr. Chair, what does the federal government recommend as far as our ending fund balance for that? It looks like it's going to be, where am I? 38%.
Yeah, are you talking about what the governor, did you say governor? I'm sorry.
The requirements, we have a requirement that can't get so high.
There's no requirement for 143. They do have a recommendation. I believe it's 3 or 4 months worth of expenses from the USDA there. I think is what he's referring to, Brian. And so,
yes.
So there's no requirement as far as a percentage. You have to have a plan, submit a spend down plan, whether that's updating cafeteria equipment, things like that. Usually the food nutrition director submits that. I believe probably that's been this case here. And so that's pretty normal, what you'd see across the state.
And back to the revenue, am I reading that the revenue is projected to be about close to $1 million less than last year?
Yes.
And where is, I'm trying to read it quickly, but where is that? What line item? Or is it a combination of?
It's mainly going to be probably from your USDA school lunch program, the 4711, and then also your lunch payments from children, your 43521 revenue code. Those are just reducing.
Thank you.
Do you have pay raises in this category? Because I think you're doing raises across the board.
It's included in the 73,100, 165 account, and then 189, as well as 105. Well,
We'll get to this a little bit more in 141, but our cost of living adjustment this year was a 2.5% increase to the table, and then all classified staff had a 1.6% step increase if they were with us from one year to the next. So 2.5% COLA increase, and if they were with us the year before, each step is equal now. I think that matches the county, so it's 1.6% for every year of service. And that's reflected in this as well.
Quick question, please, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
I was curious about 354, transportation other than students.
yes, what that is that's where a couple of our schools, we have to transport food from one of our main cafeterias to that school. So that's transportation. That includes where we purchase vans and also any mileage or anything that, is accumulated during there. So that's what that's for.
So it seems like it went up quite a bit. So that's why I'm just kind of curious.
It went up in anticipation of the Westbrook Woods Academy, because we will have to have that school will not have its own cafeteria, so we'll have to transport that school as well.
And the chair will entertain more questions or a motion.
Chairman, I move for the approval of Fund 143's revenue and expenditures as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Gooch. Any further discussion on Fund 143? Mark, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Boyd?
Yes.
Commissioner Davidson?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner McMurray?
Yes.
Commissioner Oliver?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes. Motion passes.
Okay, Budget Committee, you've heard the explanation. Are there any questions or discussions? And if not, could I hear a motion to either defer or approve, disapprove? Any questions for the director or
Chairman P., I will accept the Health and Ed's recommendation and approve this budget as presented, Fund 143.
I have a motion to accept 143 as presented.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? Call roll, Mark.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris? Yes. Commissioner Irvin? Yes. Commissioner Johnson? Yes. Commissioner Piercy? Yes. Commissioner Shrino?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes. Motion carries.
Thank you, Chairman P. Next is Education Capital Project Fund number 177.
All right, and these are really just placeholders to keep me in line. So, but we'll have a couple more information slides when we get to 141. So next we have Fund 177, and we'll look at revenue first. So in this revenue, I believe that working with Finance Director Smith helped input these numbers. You'll see an increase in property tax from 14.9 to a proposal of 18.2 345. And then one of the other ones that we've talked quite a bit about is a decrease in the schools facility or adequate facilities tax from 2.9 or 2.4 million down to 750,000. So last year's amount was 18,088,000. This year's proposal is 19,748,000. I believe there was the movement of 1.5, Michael, is that 1.9 pennies from 141? There were the movement of 1.9 pennies from 141 to 177 to help cover some of the adequate facilities tax, but also to look at next year. Next year, we'll be having to open our 3 high school additions and a new school without any additional revenue. And so we're going with just over a little bit of maintenance of effort requests the last 2 years. We're coming to that point, like everyone is, of where that rubber meets the road of we'll have added more students and only had extra state revenue. And so that's where that kind of conversation came from. The other part of that is in looking at the revenue is that we've had some internal conversations around we're going to be requesting that kind of connects with this. Laverne High School will probably go out to bid in September, and then we plan to send our middle school out in the winter as well. And so that kind of all combines of what type of revenue do we need and looking at Fund 177. So that's the revenue side. I think this gets to...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Mr. Harris.
Okay, now is 177. All right.
Thank you,
Let me
Craig.
try to let you know what budget's going to be looking at. I'll probably make this a formal motion Thursday, but I wanted to let you know exactly what I'm thinking here. We did a survey. Our human resource director did a survey, and we're way behind our peers. Our turnover rate has increased, and we need additional money to for our new hires. And right now we have 89 openings just in Sheriff's Office and EMS alone. Now, what I am going to be proposing is a 1% across the board raise. That amount is around $900,000. We had taken $375,000 from the library, and I'm going to be requesting to take $600,000 from Fund 177, which would bring you from 19.7 to 19.048. So this will help the county across the board to maintain new hires and still give you a healthy revenue source for a property tax for your capital projects. So I wanted to let you know that, and that's going to be proposed in budget on Thursday. And if there's any questions, I'll be glad to take them.
And a point of clarity, that is if Health and Ed is to make some motion to pass this and so forth. So that's just a heads up that budget's going to scrutinize this further regardless of the decision of Health and Ed tonight, which probably the case with every item. But thank you, Chairman Harris.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson.
Mr. P., Mr. P.
I'm sorry, I had my mic cut off for a second, didn't hear your recommendation.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the library fund was reduced $350,000 instead of $375,000. Is that correct, Mark?
That's correct.
Okay.
Just let the minutes reflect that the budget's having conversations about other revenue sources that has nothing to do with Health and Ed at the moment. So thank you for that clarity, but that doesn't affect this at the moment.
Because I know we have individuals watching that does not impact the Rutherford County Schools Library. So I know that would be a question I would have waiting for me in email.
Mr. Urban. Mr. Urban.
Thank you. You just mentioned Laverne and a middle school and 177 in the same sentence, and I wanted to get an idea what the thinking is. Is that going to be separate, or is that going to be funded out of 177?
That would not be funded out of 177, but...
Follow-up question, good, now, and that's good. Now, the follow-up question is there going to be any Laverne or middle school, or for that matter, elementary school money come out of that we just approved, any of that money coming out of 177?
No.
So nothing there. And do you have, what, I'll be making a motion to defer this, just heads up, but do we have would it be possible on this chart to put the prior budget year, the actual, and then carry forward with the chart? Is that possible? Because what I'm trying to sort out, I've gone back to the prior year, and it's a little tough to figure out the ones we approved last fiscal year, the one we're currently in. And I've tried to sort out exactly what was budgeted and then what may or may not have been gotten done. And part of that ties into the amendment we were just talking about, I think. But the other piece to that is then to carry over, because there does appear to be some deferrals. I don't know if that's, I'm presuming that's a fair statement, but I'm trying to get a sense for kind of this is where we are, the current budget year, this is what we actually spent money on out of 177, and then this is what we're proposing on kind of a rolling basis. And to get some level kind of accountability, number one, and transparency as well, so that we can get a better idea what 177 is being used for, et cetera.
I think,
now I'll be quiet and let you follow up.
I think deferral's the wrong word. I think encumbred's probably the right word, because the funds have been assigned to projects, but based on whether students are in the building and whether or not we can do some of that construction when students are in the building, like fall break, winter break, spring break, we may have those POs already encumbered so that we plan to spend that money based on supply chain, based on contractors. That's where you see most of your rollover. But I totally get where you're coming from, but to say that it's being deferred, it's not being deferred because we're not trying to do the project. There may not be enough supplies or people to do that project, or the school may be occupied and we can't do. Asbestos flooring is a perfect example at Smyrna West.
And now I understand where you're coming from on that. Now, my question is, when I say deferred, there was, for example, there's some high schools that had some HVAC, and there was going to be some money spent, okay? And I'm trying to sort out that suddenly from like being $8 million, it suddenly became 1 and 7 in the current chart, whereas it was all going to be spent in the prior. So I get what you're saying about encumbered, but I'm trying also to sort out kind of the tracking in 177 so that we can make a reasonable assessment. Okay, this is what the budget is for X year, current year. This is what was actually spent, and then this is the budget that we're proposing going out 5 years. And that's what I mean by deferred, because there's numbers moving in the different columns. That's great, but I think there needs to be a little clearer picture in terms of how that's happening. Is that a fair statement from your perspective?
To some degree, yes.
Is that possible, Michael?
Well, I want to touch on two things. I think, Dr. Sullivan, maybe if you could touch on this. When they when they bring you that list last year, those are the priorities that they're saying at that time. And so we quite often see a shift, I think, if there's a leak or, so some of those projects, and I'm not saying all, just some that I've seen come across through emails, some of those are going to shift based on the emergency need of if a chiller goes out somewhere or, and I don't know the specifics, you may want to touch on that in a second. And then I think the other thing to consider is the county, we don't track that on a project basis because we don't approve for 177. This body or the county doesn't approve on a project basis. Since it's a budgeted fund, it's budgeted in whole, and then the school board could shift their determination either based on emergency or just based on the school board's desire. So as far as could we get a list together, Brian, maybe Jeanette or somebody could help us get a list, because I see what you're asking for in a column of what did they initially propose last year, and then how was that changed between over the last 12 months or however many months. I think that's doable. I don't know that it could be done by Thursday night, if that's what you're asking. But I think there's probably two things there, right? I think one is probably shifting from some of the emergency nature of some of the projects, and then I would say some is probably shifting based on the board's priority of their list of projects.
And Mr. Urban, I'll jump in here. This commissioner in the last 10 years has watched their 177 spreadsheets that Mr. Trey Lee and Dr. Sullivan and Bill Spurlock and Gary, the gentleman that was here, Clardy, have made available. And theirs is and even watching the school board and watching the workshops, theirs is it's a sliding determination on what's their priority. But I've seen every line item that shows what it intends to be spent on, when it changes, when the chiller at Blackman becomes a priority over HVAC at Central. The school board makes that prerogative. They show it on the next spreadsheet. The dollar at the end is still the same until they do a general accounting practice transition at the end of the year, which we just saw. So speaking for this commissioner that's been on Health and Ed and has watched Health and Ed for 10 years, I've seen good support, accountability, and transparency in how those dollars are moved. So I just want to share that if Health and Ed has supported this fund in the past, and we may very well fund it tonight, we have done so with awareness of accountability and transparency from the school board. So it is there, and perhaps that spreadsheet could be made available to you. Dr. Sullivan, I jumped in. And
no, it's perfect, because it's a lot better for Michael to say that the school board kind of has the prerogative to spend those as they see fit that is allocated to them, than for the director of schools to say that. So appreciate that, Michael.
And good, Mr. Irvin, I interrupted you a moment ago to just make a statement on behalf of Health and Ed. So if you would continue with your question.
Just a question. It's just another question. It's just, and it follows on. I mean, does the school board track this? Is it,
Yes, absolutely.
So it's just a question of making it available.
Yep, I can do that.
Thank you.
It was important for me to say that
Thank you.
this chairman would not have been supportive of Fund 177 if it were not some evidence that it's being tracked. And I've watched it be tracked with accountability and transparency for my 10 years on the commission. So I just want budget to hear, and the school board and the general public to hear that we have been passing 177 in my years here, and we've always had access to hold the school board accountable to how they spend those funds that we've approved. So by all means, we need to get this to Commissioner Irvin. And this, I think Trey Lee may have it, so perhaps we can get something to you as soon as tomorrow.
Are you requesting really a reconciliation between the one that's in your notebook versus the one they submitted last year? Is that kind of what you're asking for?
Kind of, sort of. It's basically just the current year budget, the budget for this year, 23-24, and then the actuals, what money is actually being spent on. It's not truly a reconciliation in an accounting sense, but it basically provides, this is where the budget was set based on and I get that there are changes, and then actuals, and then what they're asking for, starting with the current 24-25 column, so that we can begin the process of kind of analyzing this is what's going on over time. If there are trends, then I think we need to take a look at it. If there's something else going on and that we just need to understand better, that would be helpful, to have that kind of analysis. Does that answer your question,
Yeah,
Michael?
so we have a version of that. The problem, and me and Brian did talk about this about 2 weeks ago, it's trying to get it in a format that's not 1,000 lines long and 1,000 lines deep, I guess, on a spreadsheet. And we tried for quite a bit of time to get it on a printable size format. And I believe you worked with maybe Jeanette and to see if we could. And I think they're probably still working on it. There is something out there that I think would give you what you need. It's trying to get it in a format that we could load onto an iPad or print, or some type of friendly version to distribute out, I think is probably the dilemma on a short-term basis.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Health and Ed, we have a item before us, and that is Fund 177. It's been presented in some questions. Any further questions or any commentary from the school board? What is the
Mr.
wishes of
Chairman.
Health and Ed? Yes.
Yes, I just want it to be restated, the clarification for the reason for the increase. There was a statement made way back before y'all started doing all that talking, about the difference in what was being recommended this year versus prior years when you talked about maintenance of effort and the increase in with regard to that? Could you speak to that again?
Yeah, I think it was twofold. One was the movement of 1.9 pennies from 141 to 177, knowing that next year we will need to move these pennies back to support the operation of Poplar Hill Elementary School and the 3 high schools. And then the second reason you see different funding is because of the new format for the adequate/schools facilities tax.
I'd like to add on top of that, keep in mind, anytime we move a penny out of 141 to any of our other funds, it automatically grows by almost 15%. So I think it's in conjunction with Dr. Sullivan and Brian, as we look at the budget, you know, you're always trying to be as efficient as we can with our property tax money. And so anytime, we can get a gain of 15% for our county taxpayer to go towards school projects or something like that, we like to take advantage of it.
Thank you, Commissioner Oliver. Any action desired on behalf of Health and Ed?
Make a motion to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second. Sure.
Mr. Gooch was the second. Mr. McMurray was the motion. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Wilson, yes, sir.
I just want to go on record and say that I concur with your opinion and your previous comments about 177. Just wanted to say that for the record. And also, I think it's a great discussion that Chairman Harris has brought up on looking at the salary increases we need for the other county employees. So I'm also in support of moving that on and hearing that discussion from them.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, are we allowed to ask questions of budget?
Yes.
Okay, because that is a question that I had. I was curious, just actually reflecting on the comments that were made in public comment and then the actual raises, and curious as to why pull it from libraries instead of general fund. I was just wondering what was the significance of doing it that way versus funding it differently.
May I suggest I think we need to take that up under other business. I don't think that's part of this motion, funding the...
Well, it was mentioned by Commissioner Harris.
I'm hesitating.
And so that's why I was just
I want to make sure we get to it.
Be curious about that.
Yeah, I want to make sure we get to that question. But the 350 or 375 is not affecting or coming out of Fund 177. Nor is there a motion to move 600,000 from it. So I'd like to entertain the motion on 177, and then in other business or another matter, let's be sure we come back to Commissioner Oliver's question.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And I get that. I get what you're saying. So that's why I was curious, why was it mentioned? If it is not pertinent to what that's why I'm just kind of a little confused.
Yes, indeed. And I recognize Commissioner Harris, and he anticipates he may amend or modify this fund Thursday. I think as a courtesy to Mr. Sullivan, he discussed that before we made a motion. So that's just my thoughts. And I don't want to shut you down. I just want to make sure we stay on the motion. Having said that, if budget has some response or comment.
I'll make a quick comment there. Is I think what budget is looking for is funds to be able to give our employees an additional raise. And we didn't want to surprise anybody in the school board or on Health and Ed and do this after y'all have already seen the budget and you passed it. We're just saying there's a possibility, and I don't know that it'll happen, that we could move around $600,000, or I don't know what the exact number would be, and still not adversely affect the budget or a future budget. So that's something we've got to look at too. Hopefully that answers your question, but the main reason it was brought up was just to let you know for information that we're looking for methods to increase what the mayor has recommended for raises. On top of that, another 1%, at least some of the committee are doing that. So that's why that discussion came up at all. Hopefully that makes it a little clearer.
So regardless of what we do here, you're just basically giving us notice that you guys might do something different.
Well, and you could do it yourself if you so desired, but I'm just saying the budget committee has oversight of this budget, and we will look at it after it all comes together, and we'll look at it again too on our budget day, which I guess is the 24th. But at that time, any commissioner can make changes or additions, subtractions. So it's not saying, well, we're going to change whatever you do. You know, this is an idea someone has on how to generate more revenues toward increased raises over what's been recommended so far. And this is one possibility. There are other possibilities out there.
Right, got you. Because that's why I was thinking this should be more of a collaborative thing. And so that's why I was trying to get more information if necessary, because it could impact how we vote. So I was just curious.
Thank you. And on the library matter, let's be sure we bring that up in other business for momentarily, because that did come up on the floor and it's been discussed. And by all means, you're curious, it was mentioned in public comments. But in my nervousness, I may come off harsh, but I'm just trying to keep the topics close to what the actual motion is. Mr. Urban.
Chairman, if I could add a little to follow up on Commissioner Oliver's and the comments. And Michael probably knows the answer. The fund balance, beginning fund balance, ending fund balance for 177.
It should be on the sheet I handed out. The one I handed out.
It should be under tab 1. If you've moved it to the right tab.
Looking at revenue, I see 6.2 million.
You asked for fund balance, correct? Yeah. Yep. So it looks their beginning fund balance is going to be about $6 million is where they're projected into the year. Probably a little bit better than that time we close out everything. So about 30%, 31%.
Thank you.
Dr. Sullivan.
Yeah, and that fund balance is essential for our operations, because without that fund balance, we would not be able to do any projects out of this until property tax started to be collected. So that's something that over the years was been built up and is essential for us.
I have a motion and a second on approving Fund 177 as presented. Any further discussion? Mark, call the roll.
Commissioner Boyd?
Yes.
Commissioner Davidson? Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner McMurray?
Yes.
Commissioner Oliver?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes. Thank you. Motion passes. Mr. P.
Okay, Budget Committee, now we're going to consider 177. Do I hear a motion to defer this, or to accept it, or to modify it?
Motion to defer.
I have a motion to defer and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of deferment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll see this on the 30th.
Thank you. That moves on to General Purpose School Fund Budget number 141.
All right, so of course this is our large 141, our operating budget. So before we go into details about certain accounts, just wanted to give kind of an overview of where we are and what we are looking at. First, as we did last year, I want to thank our principals. Did the first round of input on our budget, then we have all of our central office staff, then we have all of our board members at a budget retreat, and we start on this in December. And so just like you all start your budget process, we start in December, and it is a huge budget, so we spend a lot of time working on that. And I'm thankful for the collaboration and pride of that budget. A couple guiding principles, same as last year, increasing knowledge and understanding, transparency, focusing on people first. That's what our overall arching thing is, and then trying to be as fiscally responsible as possible. And I think you're going to note that in just about every portion of our budget, the largest majority is in our people, which is in salary line items. A couple funding requirements for this. One is staffing. 2 is looking to fund our buildings with maintenance. And 3, something that we've had to add is the funding of charter schools. And so that had to be a requirement. To look at real quick, our budget calendar, very similar, mirrors the county's budget calendar, and I know you can't read that, but it's just an update of what it looks like. I think this is on your SharePoint as well for you to be able to look at. It says Health and Ed May 24 final. It's just a quick PowerPoint I'm going through that gets us up to this day, but it shows you that we started in December with requesting information from principals and then had individual meetings with every single one of our principals at the end of January, beginning of February, and then moved through into our central office staff to look at all requests. Couple revenue, just as quick hitters, and then we'll get into more detail. Revenue for the 24-25 budget year is $538 million. A couple points to that. This is our current funding formula with TISA. $20 million is an additional in TISA funding from this current fiscal year. Where did that come from? $8 million came for growth students, and so that is something that you're going to hear us talk quite a bit about. We received $8 million for students that we actually educated this year, but you don't receive funding for them until the next year. And so that is one of the biggest discrepancies when you're looking at state funding. We educated $8 million totally on the local level without state support until the next year. Second is you'll see $8 million, which is closer to 11 now, is being set aside to record revenue for $8 million for a state-approved charter school, and we'll get into that in just a minute. And then the other additional revenue came because Governor Lee thankfully increased the TISA base from $6,860 to $7,075. We are hopeful that's going to increase every year. The governor has a requirement for all school systems to get to $50,000 for beginning teacher pay by 2026, and we depend on that 3% increase to the TISA base to get there. And we'll get there by about $60 as of right now. It's tight, but we're looking at getting there. This does not budget for outcome funding or fast growth funding, and that is essential. We do not, like just in the past, we didn't budget for BEP growth funding. We don't budget for our outcome funding. That is the number of kids who either earn a 21 on their ACT, meet proficient or advanced on TCAP, and then some varying other ways as well, because it's impossible to gauge how well they're going to do on TCAP. And then this year, we originally received $4.8 million in fast growth funding. Then we received $7.8 million estimate. And then as of last week, we've lost an additional $3 million from that. So it's back to the original 4.8. So the state's funding formula shifts quite often. And so we don't fund that for that exact reason. I will tell you, I do not expect to get fast growth funding next year. We received $4.8 million in fast growth funding. The charter school that is state-sponsored will pull enough students from us that it will remove that fast growth funding. And so that will be an additional $5 million roughly that we will not receive that you'll see reflected, which is why we don't budget that. So a couple points with expenditures. So revenue was $538, expenditures are $549. We cut $18 million in Fund 141 to present a balanced budget for Rutherford County Schools, but then of course we have the charter school portion on top of that. And so we've tried to pride ourselves on an operational standpoint of saying we balance the budget. The $11 million is for charter schools the way that the state requires them to be funded. Approximately $5 million was cut in salary growth positions. So those were requests from principals or central office staff. We cut positions there. We cut $8 million in non-salary expenditures, and then we cut $7 million out of textbooks and computers. So that is going to be something that is going to be hard to recover, but that is when the last 2 years Of course, we're grateful for all the funding because only doing maintenance of effort requests has allowed us to get some extra buildings going, which we desperately needed. But we've also added almost 4,000 students during that time. And so that is where you see some of this. Where are those cuts coming from? We cut textbooks, 1-to-1 computers. We cut out of middle school. It's going back to 2-to-1. And we hope to be able to fund that through some different avenues in the future, but we don't have that yet. And so that's where you see. And then we budgeted $11 million into fund balance to fund charter schools based on the way the state requires that. You guys are familiar with TISA, so just to give you a quick overview again of what we are budgeting. We are budgeting the base, the weights, the direct funding, and I mentioned earlier we are not budgeting that roughly $4 million, which is outcome, which talks about how much students are showing proficiency or 21 on their ACT. One part that we do not have connected to this that is part of TISA, charter school students will receive an extra 5%. It is a weight. We have not received that number as of yet, but that is an additional 5% that charter school students get outside of general education students in our traditional schools. So here is just a quick budget overview. We've talked about our current reality. We are back to, because of our deficit, having to operate in the deficit. Director of Schools, Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Runyon, we met with all of our principals, department chairs, and assistant superintendents to go over line by line. You'll see that the big things that I wanted to hit on is that fourth bullet, and it's a pretty simple fix. And I'm hoping that our legislative delegation will be involved in supporting this. I did email them in January. We passed a resolution with this in January. It was unheard, but it is something that it is frustrating when Fund 141 is budgeted $11.3 million into the deficit for 24-25 due to having to fund charter schools based on projected enrollment. And that is the key word, based on projected enrollment. Year after year, this commission knows, our school board knows, we add between 1,200 and 2,000 students. If we were funded based on projected enrollment, we would have between 12 to 15 million extra dollars every single year. And that's really where it comes down to. It's not that school choice is bad, it's not that charter schools are bad, it's that the funding mechanisms don't match each other. How a public school that is a Rutherford County charter school and how a public school that is Poplar Hill, they will both potentially, one of them open the exact same year and one's funded in advance and one's funded a year behind. And so that's where we're asking for legislative help to fund them exactly the same way, especially if they're Rutherford County school sponsored. You will see the last bullet. RCS learned late in May that the state-approved charter schools were funded in our current TISA estimates, and so we were well into our budget process by that. Quite frankly, there's not another $8 to $11 million to cut out of this budget. You would cut it out of classroom positions, and then we would be out of compliance with our state ratio. That's where you'd have to cut from. And so let's look at revenue a little bit. This gets back to your SharePoint. And so we're under BOE budget proposals and 6C141 revenue. And we don't set revenue as far as a school system. We work with our county finance office to help set revenue. Smith, do you want to go over any of the revenue as far as meeting maintenance of effort and all that kind of stuff of where it comes from and which ones those are?
We are a little $423,000 over maintenance of effort. I believe the school system requested that. Yep. And then as far as what my office felt comfortable with, I don't like to get to the penny, so yep. Gave a little extra. Yep. And so right now it's a little over $423,000 over maintenance of effort.
Perfect. Thank you. And you'll see property tax, sales tax, income tax, all of that, or investment income, sorry. All of that rolls over to the last page of the recommended for revenue of $538,434,765. And that's on page 5 of that. And if there's no questions about revenue, I'll move into expenditures and kind of give a high-level view of that, because I know that's what people are more interested in than how much are you bringing in.
We may have a question on the revenue side. I have one, Mayor Carr asked, and then Chairman Harris.
Sorry, Dr. Sullivan.
Does that break your stride?
I got a question. Is there any way we can go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
Thank you. I want to make sure I understand this correctly. You said in Fund 141 budgeted $11.3 million deficit for 24-25 school year due to having fund charter schools based on projected enrollment.
Correct.
Who projects the enrollment for those charter schools?
The two
And
that
how,
we...
and how does that arrive
Yes.
at?
The two that we have authorized, so we have Springs and Power and then American Classical Rutherford. We have worked with them to be able to come up with an estimate. Their estimates are below what their initial application was, so they were several hundred above what they anticipated, or several hundred below what they submitted on their application, so theirs is down what we would expect. Without getting too far into the weeds, Rutherford Collegiate Prep is a state-sponsored charter school by the Tennessee Charter Commission. We were unaware that the Charter Commission had approved them to change their application. We had a phone call with them in May to where it was disclosed that they don't have to tell us that they have improved additional student enrollment. So what should have been 360 this year is now 765.
My question is, if this local $11.3 million funding resulted in a deficit of 141, and assuming that the charter schools enrollment is, their projection is higher, indeed maybe much higher than the actual enrollment, is it fair to say, maybe this is directed at you, Michael, is it fair to say that the county then provided a loan to the charter schools to operate, and if that is the case, what surety does the county have that we will get that money back?
So you're correct, we would have provided an interest-free loan. Now, we would sure up, at minimum, I think Mary Ann said twice a year. At minimum, I think she used the time frame of October, November as the first sure up, and then we would potentially sure up towards the end of the year. I did ask Mary Ann Dursky about the payments, because right now, the way I read the state law, it says minimum of 9 payments a year. However, Mary Ann said the TDOE was going to require 10, so I still don't know how those are going to conflict. She did say they released some new rules, but I never got that email. I don't know that the school system did either. So she said that the TDOE was going to try to mandate that we do that the same day, I believe is the language she used, that we get our TISA payments. So that's going to be something we'll tackle. But to answer your question, there should be at least a minimum of 2 sure-up periods. However, the first one will not be, according to her, would be October, November-ish, and she didn't just give us a date, so they could get a 6-month. The first payment would be in August.
Can I add one thing to that? So I've had a question about Rutherford Collegiate Prep specifically. So my job as director of schools is to carry out the will of the board, and at that time, the board was 7-0 that denied Rutherford Collegiate Prep twice, and this commission was 21-0 that passed a resolution. And so that is the one that is causing the $8 million extra deficit.
I guess what I want to make sure, this is a lot of money, and I want to make sure that if there seems to be a large discrepancy on applications and projected enrollment, and I want to reconcile that discrepancy so that on the true-up, Michael, what is the enforcement mechanism for that true-up?
We do not have one. We do not have one. That true-up is going to be done by the Tennessee Department of Education, is my understanding. And I asked a specific question, do we have any audit authority over any of those numbers, whether it be the actual enrollment numbers or whether it be the fiscal, impact? And I believe Mary Ann's answer from the TDOE was, we have none. I believe the fiscal audit capacity would still lie with the State Comptroller's Office and with TDOE, and then I believe the enrollment audit would be from TDOE or some other, or the state board.
So to be clear, if there's any discrepancy realized in the first true-up period, the county or the school board has no enforcement mechanism to ensure that a charter school actually pays the true-up. Is that correct?
That would be my understanding as the information we received as of 2 weeks ago.
Dr. Sullivan, would that be accurate?
From my understanding, and the scary part for me is that we've mentioned it, and I know Michael's mentioned it, we are the largest district that is audited by the Comptroller's Office, and that is something that terrifies me with the Department of Education, the Charter Commission, not necessarily knowing how all this flows to where they don't audit Metro Nashville or Knoxville or Memphis Shelby. We'll be the one audited that's the largest, and that's their purview. We're audited by them. So,
thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Thank you.
If the audit functions as one would assume, it would true up. It's a matter of who.
And I'm even talking journal entries, payment. I mean, there's so many different avenues that could go awry.
But the theory is a true up.
Correct.
And like the funding, we don't know how it's going to be managed. We didn't know how the funding was going to be managed to the 11th hour.
And I believe the commission received an email, or some commissioners did, from a representative from Rutherford Collegiate Prep. Director of Schools did not receive that. I will say that the day we had our phone conversation with the Charter Commission, our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Chastain, emailed that individual that sent you all an email, and we did not receive a response until after the email was sent. So I just want to clear that up because I know that's been making it around.
I have two people that asked to speak. Commissioner Harris was next on the list, and then we'll go to Commissioner
Got two
Wilson.
questions. Two questions, both of them for Michael. So, trying to get an understanding of these charter schools. If a charter school closes or collapsed, whatever, closes doors, do we get our money back?
No.
So, we're locked in no matter what happens. Okay, my second question is, you said that on maintenance of effort, schools were like $400,000 over. Now, my question is, can some of that money be applied to capital projects?
The ultimate answer is yes, it could. But I believe throughout the year, sometimes they do shift some money in 141 for that as they see fit.
I'll hit on that. So like painting and those type of things, those are projects that are not funded in 177, so we do those type of things, stripping, waxing, flooring out of 141.
And I'm going to add something that they may not want me to add, but I'm going to add it anyways. On the elementary side, sometimes we really want to spend, because 177 is not shared, so there are some capital projects, and I think this past year was a great example of it, where we used about 36 almost million on some elementary, mainly the Beatty, but some design work and stuff like that, since that's already shared money. So I do know there's been some times where they've done a budget amendment and shifted some stuff in 141 for some shared money to try to save us some money there.
And also, Commissioner Harrison, I've known Mike to that 400 gave him a little bit of a cushion if he were accounting too closely to kind of support Brian. So some of that was just a little buffer. Did you have anything else, Craig? Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of things. One is a clarification. I believe you mentioned that it was a 7-0 decline from the school board, but then I think you said 21-0 commission. I just want for clarity, not the county commission. That was the state commission on charters. I just wanted that to be crystal clear. Several people started looking around.
It was 21-0 county commission.
Did that come to the county commission?
It was the previous commission in the previous school
board. It did?
Yes.
It came to the county commission?
Yeah,
yes.
We supported
But that's not protocol of the state. It's supposed to go directly from here to, because the last one did not. Is that a change?
That's granted, that has been 3 years ago, but at that time, that was the feeling around this particular charter school.
Well, thank you for clarity. I'm confused because in my time of being here in the 2 years, it didn't come to the county commission, so that must be a change.
That was something at that time, I believe, I wasn't the director. The county commission felt strongly and the former mayor felt strongly about. They both spoke.
Okay. And my point was just for clarity, not really a discussion for here today, but I just want for clarity. So thank you for clearing me up. My second one is, just so everyone knows, public school board members, we're going to do the best we can to see what we can do to help with this. We will talk with our state legislators. We will say and let them know what the problems are, and we will go to work. So I just don't want anyone to think that there's some opposition that we're not constantly working with them to improve it. We're going to get through this budget. What is right now is, and we will go to work to try to make sure that the best funding model possible for Rutherford County is something we're working towards. So for today, I don't know if there's any more discussion here on it because I don't see any changes we can make since this is a state government issue on how the funding currently works, but we are committed to working on improving it.
Thank you. Dr. Sullivan.
And Commissioner Wilson, it was a resolution, so it wasn't an official. The commission didn't have, or the county commission didn't have to vote. It was a resolution.
That is what I thought. Thank you for clearing that up. There was no such rule. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you all. We will now move on to the expense component of 141.
All right, let's look at expenditures, and we'll go through some of these. I'm at a high level and happy to answer any more. So I'm going to do this quickly, and then we'll go back to the SharePoint. So this is with our growth positions are funded with recurring funding, not one-time funding such as ESSER. So ESSER is going away as of September 30th. There is the talk of there being some additional funding left at the state and federal level for ESSER and them having additional expenditures available for potential spend down, and that's where we would look at middle school laptops that I talked about a little bit earlier, but that is several months into the future to see what's available. Even though BEP doesn't exist, that is still our basis for how we fund positions, and so we fund positions based on what the staffing ratio that we're required to have. Kindergarten through 6th grade is 1 to 20, with 7th and 8th you're at 1 to 25, and then 9 to 12 we roughly are about 22 to 7. Growth positions, I mean, you all have this, but it helps just kind of clarify where they all come from, and I'm going to see if I can read those. So you'll see we have vacant positions, roughly 78, and then we have growth positions, which is 87.75. Regular instruction teachers are your largest. And Dr. Martin, you may want to come up here if you have any of these answers too. I know that most of these were ESL positions. Happen to remember how many? Is it 26 and 14? Or 25 and 15? We, depending on what happens with our ESL numbers, we very well may come back to the commission again in August or September and ask for additional ESL positions. We've had to do that the last 2 years based on what our enrollment does. Then you see educational assistants 5, alternative instruction teachers. Those are to support our new Westbrooks Woods Academy. Special education teachers 16, special education EAs 4, sign language interpreters 1. We have a school nurse. We have 2 athletic trainers, 2 principal, and let me explain that a little bit. That is for our 2 alternative schools. So each school has to have a principal position. So Westbrook Woods and Simon Springs Community Schools, each one has to have a principal. A school counselor for Westbrooks Woods Academy, which is what we used to call 814 South Church Street. Social worker, secretary, BCBA specialist. 2 assistant principals, 1 at each one of the alternative schools, the Westbrooks Woods and Simon Springs. And then you see 2 weird ones, principals, a half of a principal, and then a quarter of an assistant principal. That is for when we open a brand new building, Poplar Hill, which was Beatty project name, we will bring those people on in February roughly for the principal, and then in April or May for the assistant principal. A payroll clerk, a benefits coordinator, 2 maintenance personnel, and that gets us to 87.75 growth positions. And then I'll go over where those come from in different account codes as we move forward. Here's our staffing kind of looking at May 2023. The governor signed the Teacher Paycheck Protection Act, which requires $50,000 minimum salary by 2026. You're going to see, as we talked about, the 2.25% COLA increase to our tables. That raises beginning teacher from $47,176 to $48,356. The future year increase needs to be 2 to 3% to be able to get us to that $50,000 by 2026. For classified staff, the COLA 2.5% increased the beginning pay from $16.17 to $16.57 for our custodians. And then, as I mentioned, every single classified staff has a 1.6% step increase into that. All right, so now let's look at our individual lines. So I'm going to go back to the SharePoint, and I'm on 141 expenditure, and we are going to look at some of our large account codes. So when I'm looking at this, I am looking for account number, and we're going to spend some time on the largest one, which is page 171-100. This is the largest majority of what we do in the buildings, teaching and learning. 116 is our teacher line. You'll see that increase is from $187 million to $197 million. That covers our growth positions, but also the 2.5% COLA increase. Same thing for EAs, growth positions and EAs. So I'm looking at April 2024 estimated budget, so the 4th kind of column with numbers, and then the mayor board recommended are the 2 columns I'm looking at. You'll see medical insurance has an increase. Pensions has a decrease, so that is a nice change for us. The state sets our pension rates, and so that decreased for certified teachers, so it dropped it from $17 million to $13 million. And then as we continue to go through, you'll see that entire budget is $278 million. Last year's budget was $273 million. And so that is a I wanted to call out and stop to show how much we truly cut out of non-salary line items. We had a 2.5% increase. You had over 50 growth positions that were in this line, and we only increased a little bit over $4.2 million. So we cut $10 million out of this and so it is as bare bones as it can be. You'll see textbooks went from $5.2 million to $1.5 million. And so we are coming up on a science adoption. We don't yet know what the science adoption is going to do, whether the state's going to approve a list or push it off a year. If we have a science adoption, then that's about a $9 to $10 million budget that we have to figure out how to fund some way. The other portion of that is regular instruction equipment. That is what we were talking about with computers. You'll see we were $4.2 million this year, and we have dropped it to $200,000, which is just enough computers for new students, and pausing a year on our one-to-one in middle school. Any questions on, I figure that's the easiest way to do is to hit some of the big items, and I can do a different format if a commissioner wants me to hit a different format, but just kind of the big items and explain where they are. This is the biggest one, so any questions on 71-100?
And I do see that's a full 50% of your entire budget under this one item. Chairman P. or members, do we want to entertain some questions at this juncture? Mr. Gooch.
Okay, you may have said, but I forgot. On 722,
Yes.
are we going from, what is that cut?
So those are one-to-one computers in middle school. So we rotate computers. We have one computer per student in middle and high school. That was kind of a necessity during COVID. We were on a 3-year adoption cycle. They're about $279 computers, so about 3 years is about as long as they're going to last. Some of our neighboring districts are trying to get 4 years out of them, so in order to meet maintenance of effort, we're trying to get 4 years out of them. What does that do for next year's budget? The same thing it does for everybody's budget. I mean, I don't know how to fund them next year, but didn't have to fund them this year. It's how we took it 1 year at a time.
Is that the same premise for software on 471?
No, software is my strange chief financial officer decided that he didn't like it being called software. And so if you will look at 471 software, that 2.3 million, he moved that to 399 other contracted services. And Mr. Runyon, I'm totally just joking with him, but in Mr. Runyon's opinion, you own software. And if you are paying for something year after year after year, you don't own it. And so you were contracting for that service instead. And so you will see that 2.3 million is the increase of last year was 615,000 to this year's 2.9.
Okay, thank you. I see that.
I should have hit that. Great question.
That's okay.
Mr. Irvin.
Just a quick question on, I am told, and I'm not an expert, that there's an increase of 5.9% in health insurance at the state level.
You been told that? We haven't been told that yet as a school system.
Okay. Okay, so to your knowledge, there is no 5.9% increase in health insurance.
It would not surprise me, but something we have talked about as a school board as part of this budget process. We don't have additional funding to put into medical insurance, and so that's my recommendation will be it'll have to fall onto the employees as much as we don't want it to, without additional revenue.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Runyon just confirmed the state has not released those estimates yet. They may be talking internally, but they haven't released estimates yet.
Okay, I thought the state level board has already approved. You're saying you're not aware of that?
It hasn't come to us as far as LEAs yet.
Okay. Okay. And another question I'm not an expert on. I hear there's a bus contract that's coming up for renewal.
Yep.
And I'm trying to get a sense for, is that in the budget? What kind of increase is anticipated or could be anticipated? What's the negotiation process you're looking at?
Let's take that up under transportation. There'll be a tab.
Fair enough.
Yeah, which currently is 5.5% of the proposed budget is transportation. So we will come to that. Any other questions? Carol, Dr. Sullivan.
All right, next we are going to look at special education, which is 71,200. It goes kind of through page 2 and page 3. Sorry, did I skip alternative school? I skipped alternative school. 71,150 is a small portion of our budget. You will see it is 3.1 million last year, and now is 3.5 million, and that includes 6 additional teachers and then the COLA increases. I'll go to 71,200 special education program. I want to thank Dr. Ralston, our special education coordinator, because she used every bit of federal funds that she absolutely could to be able to pull and move things around. What this shows is us moving that budget from 44.5 million to 46.5. That again includes 16 additional special education teachers, 4 EAs, a couple other ones that we have through there, like a BCBA specialist, that are all funded in these lines, along with that 2.5% increase, and still only having a little bit over a $2 million increase to her line. So,
Dr. Sullivan, on
Yes.
the special education, you said there's 4 growth positions, but we have 40 vacant positions.
Correct.
Is it, what's the issue? I mean, is it, I can guess the issue, but are those, the educational assistants paid differently
They
from
are.
the regular?
They are.
Have
And
we
we're-
looked at, has the board looked at that? Is that
We have, and it's a different pay scale, has an additional 5% increase above a general education EA, and we're still struggling to fill them. That is much better shape than it was last year, but it is still a challenge. Yep. So if anybody's interested, we can take applications tonight. Yeah. All right, let's move into 71,300, which is Career and Technical Education. Career and Technical Education is our CTE program, which is largely in your middle and high schools. We're exploring with some of the Innovative Schools Model Grant, which is not part of this budget, and outreach to our elementary schools, to where we talk about career awareness, making sure that people start developing skills, and then trying to help people to either college or career. So you'll see that budget goes from, and it looks strange because you have a big increase of Innovative Schools Model. That's why you look at this year's amended budget through 2024, it shows 27 million. That involved us moving money into there that we'll have to move money out and then move money back into at the end of the year, but that was part of the governor's grant and not part of local funding. So you'll see last year was 20 million, this year's 22. Again, your big increases are going to be those areas that we're looking at the salary increases. Next one, percentage-wise, attendance is one of our bigger increases, even though it's a small budget amount. So it's 72,110. That is attendance, and the reason you have a bigger increase is if you look at line 399, other contracted services. If you have anyone in the school system, they're familiar with Skyward. That is what we use for all of our student information, how students check their grades. We take attendance. It is a year that the state is renewing contracts, and so you have to pay for your current year and then half of a year of the next year to be able to move into your new system. So that's why you see an increase of about $110,000, $120,000 there. And out of a only budget of 1.5 million, that looks like a pretty substantial increase, but it's largely based on that requirement to look at a new vendor. Health services, so we'll skip on down to health services. So looking at the bottom of page 4, top of page 5, one of the issues that came out of, and it has become a common theme from the General Assembly, is they will pass a new legislation and say that this is funded in the base of TISA when it's not necessarily funded in the base of TISA. So when you hear that we technically need 6 additional nurses to meet the 1 to 750 ratio that the state law requires. If you don't meet that, you have to submit a letter to the Department of Education saying why you're not meeting that. Our letter is going to say you released this in May, said it was part of the TISA base when it wasn't, and we plan to address in the next fiscal year. It was too late in our budget to try to find an additional. Our schools all have nurses. Our comprehensive high schools definitely are moving towards the more than one, but that is the additional 6 positions. We were just too far in the budget process to be able to try to find that. 72,130, other student support, so you're looking at school counselors, social workers, school psychologists, a couple of those in those lines, and again, your increase is going to largely be, I think we have one additional position in this position, or in this one. One school counselor, and with your salary increase 14.4 to 15.7 million. 72,215's alternative instruction, and I know you're thinking I already saw alternative school. What's the difference? Anytime you see a 71 number, that is direct instruction on students. Anytime you see a 72 number, that is support. And so this is where your principals would go into this line for alternative schools, and that's why you're going to see that increase from 249 to 464, as we have 2 additional principals into that line. And please stop me if you want me to hit anything else in more detail. I'm happy to. Moving to 72,220, special education. This is again support, and so you'll see this year's budget was 3.2 million, and this year's increase is to 3.5, which just again takes the percentage raise increases into account. Moving to 72,320, career and technical education.
Mr. Chairman, can I get him to pause for a second?
Absolutely.
Yeah, can I get you to pause for a second? Now, where you talked about regular instruction and you talked about the additional administration, where were you pointing that out?
In alternative school?
I think it was it regular or alternative?
It'll be in 70, so it's on page 7 of 19. 72,215, line 105, goes from 249 that currently has 2 principals in it. It goes to 464 because it'll have 4 principals in it. And that is for Simon Springs Community and Westbrooks Woods Academy, Smyrna West, and Daniel McKee, those 4 schools.
So then each one has just 1 principal, though. Is that what you're saying? But you're adding the 2 additional for the 2 additional schools.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Were they on your growth sheet
They were.
you showed on the
Yes,
screen?
they are, by the line, yep. So it's still,
Part of the 87?
yep, on that one, it is about halfway through, you'll see 72, 215, 105 principal, and it shows 2. And you have this in your SharePoint, because I know that's hard to read, too. Yeah, it's just that's the way the account code requires it to be worded. You'll see principal here in a minute under something else.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we get to 72,220, special education, and I covered that, 3.2 to 3.5 with your percent raises. And that's just support, that's not direct instruction. Next one is 72,230, career and technical education. Same thing, this is the administrative portion of career and technical education. And then we're getting closer to, Commissioner Irvin, one of yours that you talked about. First, we've got technology. Technology is a big increase for us, and it could have been an even bigger increase, even though dollar amount-wise it goes from 5.5 to 6.4. As we continually move to add more technology into our buildings, the service costs for those things go up. We are adding access points and added access points for wireless internet into all of our schools, and that requires a service fee every single year. Some to protect our district from cyber attacks and all those different types of things. Those fees are going up every single year. And so as we increase technology, as the world continues to increase, this is a budget that just is going to continue to unfortunately increase every single year, and I don't even remember how many million we cut him from his request, but it was quite a few. And we're like, what is the bare minimum you can get us by to keep us secure? And that's where we went with. I think the one that kind of blows me away is the last one on page 9, and I would have thought it kind of would have been more than this for as much internet as we have. 72,250, 350, we pay $530,000 for internet. And that's only, of course, going up. So feel like what we pay at our house sometimes. Yeah. You'll see 72,260 adult program. We don't have an adult program any longer. We used to, which is why you see some actual expenditures. That went away about 2 years ago. Board of Education, 72,310. You'll see that line, we were able to cut several $100,000 out of medical insurance that wasn't being used, and then move a couple of other things around. We did have to increase legal services, and we increased liability insurance, and we had to increase trustees' commission quite a bit. And so you'll see an expenditure increase there. Director of Schools includes myself, Dr. Martin, legal, communications, school safety. That sound right? And I think that's my department. I looked back at the team to make sure I had everybody in there. So it's not just Director of Schools. When I got this position, I moved those departments directly under me because I felt like those were the ones that were the most portion of being connected to Director of Schools instead of being connected to any of those. So when you see positions, you're going to see positions that are connected to all of those departments. And we cut quite a few things as possible in those areas as well, even if it was something as simple as going from, I was trying to find a good example, maybe in the principal line item that I'll look, but we had some where we even cut it $25,000 to $20,000 just to try to save $5,000 somewhere.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Is there any positions other on this sheet, any positions you are creating?
No, sir. If they did, it would have to go back before the school board for approval. Next, we move to Office of Principal, 72,410, and this is a large line, so this is where you'll see a lot of principals, Commissioner Oliver. These are where the other 48 of them and our assistant principals are. So you'll see principal lines, assistant principal lines, secretaries, bookkeepers, all of those different areas. You'll see an increase in life insurance, and then you'll see some areas we decreased, like administrative equipment and all the one at the bottom of the page. So we can't have a lot of principal turnover this year because we've cut that budget from $70,000 to $20,000. So if they need new equipment and new computers, they're just not going to get one. I don't know another way to say that. Human, any questions on that one? Because I know that's a big one.
I have a question, and I guess, and a comment. My question was about the determination of the bonuses for the admin, the principals, and how it was kind of arbitrarily seemed like devised by the board. In particular, I'm challenged with a school like Holloway. That's level 5. Their admin is doing more with less, and yet they didn't get any bonuses, which seems, very unfair. So I'm just curious how you and the board decided on that, and if that's going to be the basis moving forward, or how it could be rectified. Because I think a level 5 is admirable, especially when you have less people doing more work.
There are multiple things. The first is we took that from our Evergreen Solutions, which is the group that did our salary study. And so we took that proposal from them, also looking at neighboring districts. The second part of that is we set those ranges, and I know that you can look at it and see they're arbitrary. You also have to look at a school like Holloway, who has a very low teacher-student ratio. And so with a school like Holloway that has 1-6 to a school like Stewart Street High School that has 1-24, those responsibilities, I'm not going to argue that all of our principals deserve bonuses for anything I can possibly give them. But running a comprehensive high school, even with 4 or 5 assistant principals, is different than running a school with 110 kids. And whether it's nighttime responsibilities, athletic responsibilities, they're different. And I don't want to get into the details of one person's job versus another, other than we looked and talked to Evergreen about that, and that was kind of the industry standard of setting it based on student enrollment. But that's something our board, of course, can look at any time and revisit as they choose. And anything that our principals are tasked with running large cities, and even if it's not a large city like Holloway, they're tasked with running a very diverse school that brings with it a lot of challenges. And anything that we can do to support and give our people more support and raises for the work they do, I'm always supportive of.
So, again, I just think it needs to be revisited.
council. Okay?
Continue, please.
Next, we will move into fiscal services, 72,510. This is Mr. Runyon's department, and you'll see 1.8 to 2.1. You'll have some increases in other contracted services. You'll see, I think we have an additional payroll clerk in this position as well, but the rest of it is connected to COLA increase. 72,520, we have an additional position of a benefits coordinator that we have budgeted, and then outside of that is going to be your traditional increases. It went from 1.58 to 1.98.
If I may stop you there. We are approaching 2 hours. We have gone from personnel to operation of plant. I would request that we take a few minutes break. Do we agree? 5-minute break. Please continue.
All right, we've got just a couple left, and so now we move more into the operations aspect. So operation of the plant, 72,610. This is page 14 of 19. You will see your big expenditures or your custodial personnel. This is where we get into quite a bit of just the operations aspect. So for example, electricity, 12.4 million, natural gas, 1.5, water and sewer, 1.9. Building and contents insurance, just like your home insurance has gone up, our building and contents insurance has gone up $700,000. So when you look at TISA provided an additional $20 million, you've just taken one of those $20 million just in electricity and building and contents insurance by itself. And so it goes very quickly. And looking at some other, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, before you, yes, with
Well,
plant.
I was curious, custodial personnel, because you have 17 vacancies there, and I don't know what the turnover looks like and everything else. One of the thoughts that's been brought up before is, and by other folks, I've kind of wondered about it too. At the county level, I think we're trying to outsource. Is the school outsourcing or
Not yet.
thinking about it, or have you run models to see how much savings, if any, could be made?
It was proposed to our board 2 years or 3 years ago. That proposal didn't go anywhere. Before we went to outsourcing, our proposal would be to get to centralize our custodial. So right now, custodial staff, and this is not something we're doing, it would take board approval. And so with cafeteria, we moved all cafeteria underneath one individual, and it's centralized cafeteria. It used to be at the school level. We've had conversations about doing that at the district level too. So you may leave a lead custodian and one custodian at each school, and then the rest of the staff would be district-wide so that we could allocate resources a little bit better. That is what we are looking at before outsourcing. We have a neighboring county that outsources, and I spend, and I don't want to call the county out, I spend a lot of time in that county for athletic events for my child, and the level of service is not what we have right now, and I would not want that in our schools. So we have looked at it. It's not an avenue the board has looked at going it just yet. But it's on the table in the future.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Looking then going into maintenance and operation, and maintenance of the plant somewhat run together, and how we move, whether it is painting, and this is kind of what Commissioner Harris talked about earlier. We do painting, flooring, some of these different things out of these lines. This is where more of your central office type maintenance personnel are, in line 167 under that account. And you will see that this account went from 12.2 to 11.9, and so we cut administrative equipment. It was originally $150,000. We moved some money into it at $2 million, and then we dropped it to $150,000. I know our maintenance staff requested a minimum of 6 personnel to be able to service our buildings, and we only approved 2. I would have loved to approve 6. We just didn't have a way to make it work. All right, now let's move into transportation. We have some questions about transportation, and I'll get into these. 105 supervisor director. So there are two individuals in that line. You'll see we have an assistant director. If you look back at 23, we did not have an assistant director. We have an assistant director now, which is your reason for your difference. And then you'll see clerical personnel zeroed out over this year because we have moved those into 164 and 189. So those numbers, as you look to see why are some of those numbers changing, we've reclassified those people into their correct accounts. When you look over the next page, this is where you'll get your huge amounts in 315. So 315, the budget for contract with vehicle owners, so this is our bus contractors, 25.5 million. This year it'll be 27.1 million. We are coming up on a contract year. Bus contractors are a very valued member of our community, but it also becomes very political. And so that is an aspect that we will start getting into in September, October with that negotiation process. We do envision having open routes this school year. We looked at doing a parent responsibility zone where basically you had, so if you were a non-Title I school, then you were outside of a mile or a half a mile that you wouldn't have transportation. It would have saved about $1.5 million. That's not an area we chose to go down, but we are getting to that point to be able, we are running out of contractors and drivers to be able to provide the routes. That is going to continue as traffic increases. We have certain amounts of limits that kids can be on buses, and with traffic increasing, there's only so many routes we can do. The other part of that is, we talked about it at our board meeting, but I think it's great for the commission to understand. Under BEP, you were funded for transportation. You were reimbursed for mileage over 1.5 miles for bus transportation. Under TISA, it is included in the base. So what does that mean? It means for a district like us, we are funding all transportation out of our general purpose school funds. For a district like Tullahoma, who provides no transportation, they're still getting the exact same per pupil expenditure that we are. And so that's something we're going to just do education around for our community. Our community expects bus services. And so, but if you expect bus services, you unfortunately have to pay for bus services. We are not getting extra revenue any longer from the state to provide that service. It is strictly on all students that we have.
Mr. Pearson.
100% correct, not a mandatory service. It will, I take that back. For the large majority, yes. For special education in some instances, and for homeless students, it would be mandatory. Everyone else, no.
So that would mean it's not required to be provided by the county?
Correct.
I just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes, thank you. Director, you said there'll be some renegotiations going on in the
Yes.
fall. What's that going to make this line item look like then? Would there possibly be decreases, or what do you anticipate?
I think that is all up to, it will definitely increase. To say that it would decrease with continuing to grow, to look at, I know in this portion of the budget, the previous contract, I believe, was 4 years ago. The first year, or first and second year, was a 5% increase, and then the last two were a 3% increase. And so those are part that we have a team that is led by our attorney, Jeff Reed, and our staff, and then the bus contractors are represented, and we go through a pretty lengthy, heated negotiation process that I'm sure as we move forward, we'll also entertain looking at outside vendors as well. I hope that's not the avenue we have to go, but I don't think we're doing our due diligence if we don't look to see what big contractors can provide to us. So I don't want to scare our contractors and say we're looking to go outsourcing. We're not, but we have to have comparison data. And that's, I wouldn't be doing my job in supporting this district if I didn't look to see what outside outsourcing would cost, because we are already outsourcing with contractors. They're not our employees.
And let me jump in, Ms. Oliver, and then you'll come back just into that. When does this contract end? During this fiscal year?
No, it ends next June 30th of 2025.
So this does get us through
This year, absolutely.
And your negotiations will hit next year's budget, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just
Yep. Which is where we've, of course, being the director, I hear the threats and all those different kind of comments, and we hope that it doesn't get to that level, because we're still under contract with each other.
Ms. Oliver can continue, and then I think, Steve, you'll be next.
That was what I was curious about that as well, so thank you for that. because I was wondering how this was going to impact.
It will not impact this number. It'll
Not
be the
this
next year.
budget, but,
Yep.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Piercy.
Something else you may take into consider in the coming years of a new bus contract. I'm not a bus contractor anymore, so I can talk about it. The buses are getting so high, the banks are very reluctant to know on a bus loan based on the pay. So that will become an issue very quickly right there.
And the interest rates, I'm sure, are not helping that conversation whatsoever.
No, not at all. You take a bus now, it's getting very close to 200,000. So that's high payments.
Yeah.
I think
Three
they're
time
paying
out.
excess of 9% interest rates too on that. So yeah, Steve, you brought up, so the cost to purchase the buses was one of the concerns the contractors have shared with me. Of course, the cost to maintain, the new buses can be under warranty, but the carrying cost on the new bus is starting to outweigh that. So they're in the dilemma of that. Of course, fuel has fluctuated quite a bit, and I don't know if Commissioner Irvin had any concerns from contractors that you needed to share, or anyone else.
Transportation's a concern for me too, because it's a service that our community's used to and almost a service our community demands, but we have to pay for it. And so that's something that
One other comment I'd like to make, if you would let me. The service through the shops and all, the price, hourly wage has doubled also. But a comment toward outsourcing your routes. I know it's something you'll need to look at, but you'll need to think about that long and hard, because you lose the personal touch of a bus owner-operator, and you will not get that with an outsourced company. Thank you.
The city owns their buses and their employees?
correct. And we are in no fiscal manner to be able to do that. None.
They're a fraction of...
Yeah, we'd look at 50, 60 million right off the bat to purchase buses, and I have no idea where that would come from, plus staffing. To hit on yours, Commissioner Piercy, the Swaders are a lot of the reason I am where I am today, so Deborah and Henry. So I 100% agree, and I've mentioned that more times than I care to, but Henry's still great support. Yep.
Is your fuel formula keeping up? I've had some concerns from contractors on that issue.
How many buses are there, Mr. Chairman?
How many routes do we have? 318.
Is that 318 buses, or is that?
Routes.
One bus. Okay, one bus, one route. Okay.
Please continue, Dr. Sullivan.
Okay. Moving past transportation, because we're almost through that. Community services, this is just a small charge we have in 599. I don't even, quite frankly, know what that is. Do you have any idea what 599 is? Just being honest, don't know what that $10,000 is.
That $10,000 is our reimbursement that we send down to the school for clothing.
Oh, I did that. Okay, gotcha. Of all the things that slipped my mind, that probably shouldn't have been one of them, but it did. Next is early childhood education. This is a mixture of voluntary pre-K and integrated pre-K. So let me hit on that a little bit. Integrated pre-K is an integrated model with special education and what we call typical students, and so our peer group. And so we are required by federal and state law to provide that model. The one we are not required to provide is voluntary pre-K. We have 18 classrooms now. We had 21. We are decreasing to 18 due to lack of space. And then we have tried to integrate those models a little bit more so that you could combine them and use funding a little bit differently. That is a service that a lot of communities are increasing, but due to space, that is a service that we have not been increasing. We do know in some of our schools, and really in a lot of our schools, that our students that start with us as 4-year-olds do quite well if they're in a voluntary or integrated pre-K program and they're prepared to go to kindergarten. But that's just not an avenue that we're really able to expand very much right now. That's not an avenue that is supported by the governor right now for universal pre-K, so that is something that we're just kind of holding steady as we still have the classrooms and without a financial burden. And we do receive 1.6 million roughly from the state to support the voluntary portion of that. The next one's regular capital outlay, so 76,100. You'll see this decrease from 923,000 to 311,000. It used to just be 25,000. This is where we put funding in case we need to address something right off the bat, such as a chiller, or bring in, last year we had Central Magnets mold situation that we had to address, that we could address right away instead of waiting to go through the approval process. This gives us funds to be able to do that. It's not a large amount, but it is a little. Then you'll see education, 612, principal on other loans. That number is decreasing, and then so is the interest on other loans. And I believe these were energy loans, if I'm not correct, that go back about a decade, that are continuing to decrease. And that gets us to our overall, as we flip then over to the back. 99,100, so up until that amount, everything is balanced. We have transfers to other funds of $3 million. If you look at the 34.8, which is beside it, which is what we use this year at a fund balance to be able to support the Beatty property or Poplar Hill. This year, we're looking at $3 million of 3.367. Those are for our Rutherford County authorized charter schools. And then 595 TISA on behalf payments of 8.026 million. That is for charter commission authorized charter schools, to where you get that deficit of 11,394,000. And that brings our total expenditure to $549,828. That's something up, Michael.
I did just some high-level calculations last night, and I put teachers plus health and technology, in my mind as a layperson, not an educator, into the classroom. 80.6% of this budget is in the classroom. That includes principals, for instance. You may call principals administrators, but I'm seeing principals feet on the ground in the school. So 80% classroom. And I took admin, I took the superintendent's office, I took HR, finance, and put those in the category, and it's 2.6% of the budget, which I felt pretty good about. 3% into that administration. I've told Dr. Sullivan a matrix I look at. If we get heavy on administration per student or heavy on administration per teacher, then I think we're getting backwards. So that's a number that this commissioner always looks at and I find important. So I feel pretty good about this 80-20. The physical plant is 9%. The two items of physical plant is 9%. Transportation, 5.6, which makes up 97.8% of the budget. And then 2.2% is other. So sometimes I have to come way back up high level. So I just want to share that with y'all. 80% classroom, 2.6% admin. Those are some of the thoughts I use as I contemplate this budget. Having said that, any other comments, observations?
Question, please. So basically, you're just looking at 422,000 over maintenance of effort. Is that what was? And you haven't requested anything above maintenance of effort for like how many years now? For 2 years.
2, and then one of those years we moved 11. I could have to go back and look how many pennies we've removed over the year. So we've moved a lot of pennies over,
Yeah.
but as I mentioned earlier, that day comes to fruition next year. Like
Yeah.
I don't have a way to do it again next year.
Gotcha. Thank you.
The total, I wish it was 5 million. 549,828,778. Yep.
Mr. Smith.
I was going to answer Commissioner Oliver's question. It's 423,696 to be exact. And then you asked a question about pennies, and I can answer you that as well. We moved 7 pennies in 2023, and then we moved 10 last year. Now, I want to clarify, just because we moved pennies doesn't mean you're not replacing it with The reason we're able to move pennies is because we're replacing it with other local revenue. So we didn't just decrease local revenue for education by those. It was offset by some other increase, whether that be sales tax, business tax, a number of other things.
Good point.
Mr. Gooch.
This is kind of my understanding, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're moving around, 2 cents from general purpose school to primarily the educational capital projects to beef up that area. Is that the reason we're seeing a decrease in textbooks and computers?
Textbooks and computers, we cut strictly to get the budget balanced before we knew about the charter school issue. We had to come up with a way to cut an additional funding, and it came from textbooks and computers. Now, how do I do it next year? I'm fully transparent. I've told the board, I don't know how we do it next year without additional revenue.
So it's not due to moving the 2 cents, trying to fund the charter schools. Okay.
No, we built our budget strictly on maintenance of effort. And so when just to clarify. And I tried to be as professional as possible because I know there's different viewpoints. But it is very frustrating to work for months to balance your budget and then have that happen.
We will most certainly have that in the front of our minds as we progress in next year's budget. And as Commissioner Wilson said, I'm sure we will all be communicating with our state delegates to address what I think an unintended consequence was. Dr. Sullivan, thank you for that. And I'm not dismissing you from the floor, of course, but Dr. Martin and Mr. Runyon, thank you for that.
If you don't mind, can I thank them too?
Please do.
So obviously the last 2.5 weeks I've been out, and I just want to give a shout out, one, to our board, thank them for all their support while I was gone, but also to our staff, and Dr. Martin taking the lead when she didn't want to take the lead, and I just appreciate her and Mr. Runyon just keeping the end of May is one of the worst times of the school year, and they did all the graduations, shutting the school system down for students, and getting this budget all the way finished prepared. So I greatly appreciate you, and words will never be enough, so thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. And are there any other questions? And is there a motion from Health and Ed?
Chairman, I move that we...
I was going to motion that we accept the budget as proposed.
You have a second. Commissioner Boyd, seconded. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mark, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Boyd?
Yes.
Commissioner Davidson?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch? Commissioner McMurray?
Yes.
Commissioner Oliver?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Budget Committee, the same questions in front of us now, and I'll accept a motion either to defer to the 30th, or we'll accept a motion tonight to accept or reject or
Motion to defer.
have a motion to defer. I hear a second. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mark, call roll on this one again. That way I can definitely hear them all.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Irvin?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson? Commissioner Piercy? Commissioner Shrino?
Yes.
Commissioner P?
Yes, so we'll address this on the 30th.
What would you like for me to prepare on the 30th?
I think what you've got in front of you now, Commissioner Irvin had a couple of questions. Other than that,
You don't need me to go through it all again.
you might bring some donuts or
Okay,
pizza or
sounds great.
something like that. We may be a while.
Yeah.
Other than that,
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
we probably will have a discussion about the 177 fund, so be prepared for that. We don't want any surprises there.
Mr. Chairman, just a question for Dr. Sullivan. Will you or staff members be in your office the next few days in case Commissioner Irvin needs to call and ask any detailed questions?
Thursday and Friday for sure. Tomorrow,
Thursday and Friday for sure.
Tomorrow I'm picking out a gravestone. I'd much rather not be there, but Thursday and Friday I will be. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. That concludes you guys. I have one item under other business, and we'll get to that in just a moment. I would like to recognize Chair of Board of Education, Sheila Bratton. Thank you for the heavy lifting that you and your group have done. I've watched your meetings, and y'all have a very difficult and arduous mission, and I appreciate the efforts y'all have made. So thank you for that. Having said that, Ms. Oliver, would you had mentioned a library funding item. If you can choose to discuss that now if you wish, or floor is open for other business.
The question that I had was just curious because it was presented when we were looking at 177, so I was just trying to figure out how that tied in. And then, again, just curious why that couldn't come from elsewhere, why it was coming from library. So the reason why I asked is because it was brought up.
So during our discussion, Chairman Harris mentioned that in order to generate some revenue for raises, he acknowledged that one source that budget considering is $300,000+ from Linebaugh Library, and the other is from Fund 177. Chairman, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, of course, we're looking for revenue sources, and there are others beside those two that were mentioned. Did you ask specifically why the Linebaugh Library funds was looked at? I think that had to do with what Murfreesboro City is looking at, and it had to do with the large fund balance that they've got. They had a fund balance that exceeded $2 million or somewhere in that neighborhood, and we've added to it. That is the discussion. I'm not saying I advocate one way or the other. Only thing I do want to say about that, it is not punitive. One of the board members addressed us the other night, who's the treasurer for Linebaugh, and he stated that he didn't feel like this would adversely hurt the Linebaugh library system. So that's about all I can really say about that. There may be other places that we can find revenue. The main thing we're wanting to do is try to increase the amount that's already been proposed for raises for our employees. When it's been said, we were looking at 1% across the board, and across the board is not just public safety, that's everyone in our general fund. So I want to make that clear too. Since there may or may not be more discussion, I want to mention that on Thursday night, what we'll be looking at is, when we're done, of course, we'll be looking at this budget. The parts of it we haven't already approved, but we will have to propose the annual budget for publication. Now, to do that, if you've got changes that you want to make, speaking directly to the Budget Committee, any of you commissioners that are out there, of course, can contact us and make proposals too. But that is the time where we're going to have to say, okay, we're basically going to draw a line in the sand. Here's the budget we're throwing out there, and we're sending that out to publication so the public can look at that and have a chance to digest it, ask questions, and we'll later have a public hearing. I'll have to look back at the date when we'll have that. But anyway, that gives the public a chance to see what we're looking at. I will say we are not proposing a tax increase. The mayor has not proposed a tax increase. I know the people that have talked to me on the budget are looking, especially where they're looking for other revenue sources to increase this pay, do not want to adversely affect our budget for the following year. And that's the trouble. Sometimes you can make a change here, but you'll stumble and hurt yourself in the following year. And we're trying to make sure that doesn't happen. So hopefully y'all can join us on the 30th. It's at 5:30, same area here.
Chairman.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate you saying that it's not punitive. and just kind of making clarification. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, my kids grew up at the Line Ball Library. We love the place, so.
Any other business for Health and Ed? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn Health and Ed. Meeting adjourned.
You can hit that hammer again. We're adjourned for budget.
Thank you.